Hi everyone, my name is Sylvain. I'm a software engineer at Algolia, and this talk will be about how we build our analytics API. So for context, I'm going to be talking about a public-facing API that serves metrics in near real time over billions of events per day. So I will go through the decision we had to make, the challenge we had to overcome, and then I will explain in more detail actually how we implemented our solution. So hopefully by the end of this talk, you will have a pretty good idea of how our whole pipeline works. But first, let me introduce a little bit Algolia. Algolia, so we are a French startup. We are a hosted search API. So in other words, what we do, we provide developers a way to implement search within their application. Like the same way Stripe does a payment API or Twilio does communication API, we do search API. So the way it works is, as a developer, you send us your data, we index it, and then we provide you with an API to search through your data. Some of our key features are speed and relevance. You can expect to get search result in a few milliseconds, which allows user experience similar to the one you're used to on Google. We call it as you type search or instant search. Thanks to Algolia, you can provide this kind of experience. Example of that are here two examples on two of our customers, Birchbox and Twitch. So highlighting what I just mentioned. So you get result at the first keystrokes. Even if you make typos, the engine is typo tolerant by default. It just gives a good user experience. And finally, I can share a few numbers about Algolia. So we are roughly 200 employees spread between mostly Paris and San Francisco. Half of those employees are engineers. We are really a tech company. We build our product from the ground up. In terms of scale and infrastructure, so we operate our own servers. We have a bare metal approach for performance reasons. Our customers can choose to be hosted in 16 regions throughout all the continent. That's as much as AWS and even more than GCP. And in terms of scale, today our API processes more than 40 billion searches per month, so a bit more than 1 billion per day. And on top of those search events, we also provide our customers with a analytics API, which this talk is about. So what do I mean by search analytics or search API? This is a screenshot from our dashboard. So every customer of Algolia, as soon as you have an application, you have free access to this kind of dashboard. The values are not interesting here, but what's important is the kind of metrics we are supposed to return. We have count, distant counts, and we do a lot of tops. And we do this over those billions of events that we receive every day. So the main challenge that we had to overcome was how do we make this kind of dashboard load super fast, even though this is potentially querying billions of rows under the hood. So for context, before I start explaining what we did today, let's see where we are coming from. The first analytics API that we provided was released 4 years ago. At that time, we used Elasticsearch for the purpose of the analytics metrics. We self-hosted it. At that time, our load was roughly 500 million searches per month. So as you can see, there's been a bit of growth since then. So what used to work back then started showing some sign of fatigue. So we started adding a little bit of sampling, a little bit more of sampling. Then we started to have to restart the cluster once a day, twice a day. It was not scaling. We were self-hosting it, so we had to spend a lot of time actually maintaining that solution. So at some point we decided, okay, it's time to rethink that approach. We were also using a very old version of Elasticsearch. If we wanted to upgrade, we would have to rewrite all the queries, all the plugins, everything was not compatible. So it was a good time to actually, let's start from scratch. So what did we want in the end? The main challenge was how do we get an analytics API that, whatever the time range queried by our customers, gives a response in a sub-second, or we call it a human real-time. We have a very fast search API, responding in milliseconds. We also want our analytics API to be fast. We don't want our customers to wait minutes or hours to get their dashboard. So we are really into a online analytics workload. We're not talking about ad hoc analysis or offline analysis. Low latency, here by latency I mean how long does it take for an event from the moment it actually happened in the system to be reflected into your dashboard. This is the same. We don't want to have our customers wait for hours or for the day to get their metrics. We want them to have a quick feedback about how their system is behaving. What's complicated? Another complication is that we give our customers a lot of retention. They can have up to a year worth of retention, sometimes even more. So if you look at the billions of events we have every day, after a year, that's a lot of events. So how do we still make an API answer in less than a second when you potentially have to scan a dozen or hundreds of billions of rows? In terms of scaling, at Algolia, currently our growth rate is about 2x per year. So every year we double our load. So it was critical to find a solution that will not just work for now, but will work in 2 or 3 years from now. Ideally just by adding more machines. And we are looking for a hosted solution. We don't see ourselves, we don't think our job is to maintain databases. We focus on building a good search product. We don't want to spend our time maintaining this kind of tool. So I'm going to start by showing the big picture, and then I'm going to dive down into the data store. This is basically how the pipeline works today. Starting from the left, you see we have all our search servers or search API. Today, that's a few thousand servers processing the search queries. All those servers produces logs. From the moment they leave the server, we start using the Google Cloud Platform. So we send those events to GCS. Then we leverage the GCS person notification. So every time an event or a file is written into GCS, a message is sent on a topic. So we can actually have our aggregator starting to perform some pre-aggregation. We pre-aggregate the queries. We enrich the data. For instance, we resolve the country from the IP, this kind of stuff. All those services or microservices are hosted on Kubernetes, also on the Google Cloud Platform. We use Golang for pretty much everything except the search API, which is in C++ for performance reasons. Why Golang? Because we found it to be a pretty good balance between productivity and performances. And why Kubernetes? One of the main features we use is auto-scaling. Our load varies a lot throughout the day. So having a system that automatically removes the resources when we don't need them and spot them when we have a surge is both useful to handle those load, and it also saves money when we don't need those resources. So ultimately, all those events are going to be sent into Citus. And this Citus is our data store. I'm going to spend a lot of time actually explaining what is Citus and how we use it, because most of the logic actually lives in Citus. So before actually explaining what is Citus and how we use it, so Citus is our data store. So why Citus? Or why did we not choose some common players like BigQuery or Redshift? So as I said, we were looking for a hosted solution. So that rolled out things like a Druid or ClickHouse. We didn't want to maintain this ourselves. So we first look at BigQuery and Redshift. The TLDR is we found them to be extremely good at data warehousing, which is what they are made for originally. But for when you have a real-time multi-tenant workload like we do, we found actually Citus to be a better fit. Another reason we also didn't use BigQuery is the pricing model. BigQuery, you pay per usage. You pay per the amount of data that you scan. So we didn't really think it would be safe to use that to power a public-facing API. We don't want to rate limit our customers, so then it was a bit hard to think in terms of predictability for the cost. So, what is Citus? Okay, 2 keywords: Postgres and extension. Postgres because under the hood it's just a plain Postgres, and extension, which means it's by opposition of fork. It's not a fork, it's an extension, which means that we are running always up-to-date Postgres with all the features of Postgres. So what does this extension do? Well, it allows us to scale Postgres seamlessly. As you can see on the schema here, we have it's a classic worker slave or worker master model. We have the so on Citus we call that a coordinator. The coordinator holds all the metadata of the system. It runs the Citus extension, and under the hood we have as many workers as we want, with as many shards as we want. And Citus allows us to distribute our table based on some distribution key, just like Redshift, for instance. But in what's more is that you've got the distribution aspect of Citus, but then you've got all the aspect of Postgres that you're used to, all the join strategies, all the indices. With Postgres 10 now, you've got the partition, you've got the statistics, everything is here. So that makes it very suitable for a multi-tenant workload. And as we'll see in the next slide, Citus is particularly well suited for real-time analytics. Why? Because it comes, for instance, with other extensions like HLL, Hyperloglog, that I will cover later, and TopN, which allows to do fast approximative tops, which we use a lot. And one of the promise of Citus is to be able to scale out, and they do this in 2 ways. We can easily scale vertically by just swapping the workers for more machines with more resources, or we can scale horizontally by simply adding more workers, and then Citus will just rebalance the shard automatically for us. Okay, so this is the data store. Now, how do we actually achieve subsequent response time when you have billions of events? For a good metric to keep in mind with Postgres is roughly if you're aggregating 1 million rows with 1 core, it will take roughly a second or maybe a bit less. So you see that if you are trying to do this kind of analytical queries and you expect to scan billions of rows, you can't get subsequent performances, or you will need prohibitively expensive hardware. So what we do is we use a roll-up approach, where we first get the raw data into the system, we roll it up, and the actual queries, the actual analytics API queries, will target the roll-ups and never the raw data. So what do I mean by a roll-up? So a roll-up is basically a fancy way for aggregation. We pre-aggregate the data. The trade-off are this only works if you are OK losing granularity. In our case, that's fine. That means that you won't be able to perform fine-grained offline or ad hoc analysis. You need to know in advance the queries that you will need to make, because you need to have the data already rolled up or already pre-computed. A simple example is if you have 3 queries made, those 3 queries, we can aggregate them and say we only have 3 of them, and we have actually here truncated this doesn't work. Well, we have truncated the timestamp basically, but I will cover that in the next slide. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take an example. If let's say you are building a subset of our analytics API, and you want to answer 3 questions very fast. You want to answer how many queries did your system see for a given time range? How many distinct users did you see for a given time range? And what were the top queries that you see in a given time range? So the first thing to do is to add your raw events into the database. So this is the schema that we're going to use. Pretty straightforward. The first thing we're going to do next is we're going to shard that table by tenant ID. So for us, every app, every customer is a tenant. They don't really share anything together, so we can just distribute them. And then we're going to just, in real time, pretty much insert data into that table. Since this is Postgres, we leverage the copy command. We run them in parallel. We batch insert as much as we can. And in our test, we saw that we could go up to 7 million rows per second, which is about 600 billion rows per day. So we are pretty confident that this will be enough in our case. Obviously, those performances depends on a few factors: replication factor, how many indices do you have on your table. The more index you have, the more I/O Postgres has to do, so you have to find the right balance. But generally speaking, it's the performance where there. Okay, so we have the raw events into the table. Now the next step is to actually store the rollup. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create the tables that will hold the aggregation. We're going to pick a time frame. So here we choose to store aggregate per 5-minute window. Why 5 minutes? Because we found it to be a good trade-off between size on disk at the end and latency. So if you remember, we want to return 3 metrics. We want to return a count of queries. We want to return a distinct count of user, and we want to return a top. So for the count, we will just store an integer. For the user count, though, we will use HLL. So HLL, that's in case. So I'm going to explain what HLL is. HLL stands for hyperlog-log. It's a data structure for probabilistic distinct count, approximative distinct count, and it does it very fast. Basically, that's all. Another thing to know: why don't we just store a number? Well, how does it work if you have pre-computed a count for a day, and another count for another day, and then you want to do the distinct count for those 2 days? Using HLL, you can actually do the intersection of those sets, which will give you the cardinality of the distinct element in those 2 sets, which won't be possible if you had just pre-computed just a cardinality itself. Otherwise, you will have to recompute everything, which would be too primitive. And finally, the top queries, we use the JSON-B field. Why? Because, so this is actually this. Why? Because we're going to use the top-n extension, which, as we'll see, allows us to do approximative tops. So the JSON-B field here will hold the result of that aggregation. So it will keep a tops of items ordered by frequency, like a heap or a priority queue. So again, that table, we distribute it by tenant ID. So this is also very important. All the data for a given customer lives on the same shard. So there is no, the goal is to avoid the data. The goal is to make sure that when we perform some aggregation or when we do any kind of logic, the execution happens at the shard node. The goal is that the data never leaves a shard to go through the coordinator back to another shard. All the data stays in the same instance of Postgres. Okay, so we are ingesting the raw data. We have the rollup table ready. How do we build the rollup? So it's actually a fairly simple insert, select, group by query. We truncate the timestamp. This is where we lose the granularity. We are going to call that function every 5 minutes because that's our time window. This is an example of how we use actually the HLL on the top-n aggregation. We store the hash of the user ID into the HLL structure. This, under the hood, will keep track of all the items we push into the top, and will make sure that at the end of the aggregation, we only have the top n, for instance, top 1000. And it's approximative because it won't keep all the data. It will keep up to n items, and depending on how you configure it. Again, this function will be pushed down to all the workers node, so it's executed across all the workers. So the running time of that function will be bounded by the slowest of your node or your shard. One thing we had to deal with is out-of-order events. How does it work when you are processing data for a time range that you have already processed? In our case, this happens all the time. We always have out-of-order events. Why? Because we never know when our logs will actually come through. We have thousands of search servers. Those search servers are spread all over the world. Connectivity issue arrives all the time. So there is no guarantee. A log that has been made at an event that has been made at, say, midnight, we might only see it 1 hour after or 2 hours after. Or we don't know. So what we did is we decided to process data not based on the time they were made, but based on the time we received them. So that means that whenever that function runs, we look at all the data received from the last time it ran until almost now. So that's all good. Now, this causes another kind of issue. What happens when you have conflicts? What happens when you are processing data for a time range that you have already processed? What do you do with this? Do you override? Do you do something incremental? So we decided to, at least for this part of the pipeline, to have an incremental approach. That means that when we see some data, when we are computing data for a range that we already have data, we just merge it with what we have. And this is done using the on-conflict clause of Postgres. And this works because we can merge HLL together. This works because we can merge stubs together. You could imagine having a separate part of your pipeline that does, for instance, batch processing, let's say at the end of the day, to reconcile or to make up for the errors that could happen in the real-time part of the pipeline. And in that case, you will just overwrite your data. So you will remove the plus, and you will just say this equals this. So we've got the data rolled up. We are almost ready to query it. Actually, we could query it like this. There's actually one thing we do more is that at the end of the day, we actually take all those 5-minute buckets and we further roll them up into a final 1-day rollup. Why? Again, we are losing even more granularity, but for our product, it was completely fine to say we only offer metrics based on the day and not based on a minute or an hour. The main metric to track is what is your compression factor. For every row that you insert, how many in the end in your table do you keep? In our case, obviously this depends on the dimension that you use for your aggregation. But in our case, we saw a compression ratio going from 200 to 50,000, depending on the dimension. That means that for every 50,000 rows we actually insert into our table, we keep only one at the end of the day. So you can see how actually the analytics API can respond in less than a second. If you are looking for data for 1 week, it's possible that you only have to find 7 rows into a single table on a single instance. Some samples of the queries. So this is actually the actual queries that our analytics API is doing. So if we remember the 3 metrics we wanted to build were having a count of queries, having a distinct user count, and having a top. This is how we simply do it. So we perform a final aggregation just based on what is the application, what is the time range. So we look for the rows, we do a final aggregation, and voila. Those queries usually run in less than 100 milliseconds. So to finish, I have a few numbers I can share about our clusters. Every minute in terms of aggregation, we roll up 20 million rows in 20 seconds. So we have a lot of room we have a much of leeway actually. And in terms of API latency, which was the main factor, how fast can an API be? The P95 we found it to be less than half a second. This is included network and everything. So we are pretty happy with this solution. So To conclude, so we found the rollup approach to be well, very effective, even more than when we thought. It's working at scale for us. We expect it to work like this in the coming years. We've also been very, very pleased with Citus. We didn't have any experience with this project before, and we found a team on a project that was very, very reactive and very, very efficient. We are starting to build even more products based on Citus. We have released our Click Analytics API, which is based on the Analytics API that is also leveraging Citus, and we have even more products like this to come. That's what I wanted to share. Thank you. If you have any question, that's the moment. Yes.
How much data do you have in your storage? Because you talked about the number of queries, but how much data?
Okay, so the question was how much data do we actually have? So every day we push 1 billion rows. The thing is, once we have rolled it up, we actually remove them because we no longer need them. So the only data that we keep is the final aggregation. And today, this is in the order of the hundreds of the gigabytes, basically. Even though every day we push basically 2 terabytes of data, and the system has been running for 6 months, and we have not even 1 terabyte in the end for the aggregate. All right, thank you.